Hey gang, David Michael Phelps here, and on this episode of Working Man, we'll be talking with CNC Machinist Dan Grabinski. Dan and I talk about the state of modern manufacturing, the challenges of finding good people to fill good positions, the cultural side of learning a trade, and the attitude it takes to enter into a tradition of craftsmanship. At the end of the episode, we'll also share a short passage from John Paul II's encyclical Laborem Exercens, just as an added opportunity for your reflection. That's an encyclical we talk a lot about on the show and at Harmel. And sometime in the future, we'll do a deep dive into what are sometimes called the social encyclicals, like Laborem Exercens. But for those of you who have not had time to curl up and read these texts, I'd like to start sharing parts of them here on the podcast for you to reflect on them as you get Working Man jammed into your ear holes. So stick around to the end for that, but in the meantime, here's Dan Grabinski.
I've been in the machining industry for about 8 years. I've been to a couple of different shops, and I can tell you just from being out there that there's a serious shortage in the workforce. It's crazy. Like the last shop I worked at, there was maybe 6 employees that were under 50 years old. There's a serious shortage out there, and I've wanted to make a career out of this. I've learned each of the individual steps and machines, and I want to go all the way to management if that's possible here within the next few years. Next, say, 10 years down the road.
What sort of problems do you experience or observe because of the shortage of that skilled labor?
Well, one I see on a daily basis is either you can't hire anyone. Like right now, we are looking to hire a few people, but you either can't hire anyone, or the people you do, it's kind of just like a stepping stone. It's a job. They don't take it seriously, and they don't last more than a couple of months.
So they end up just not having much of an investment in what they're doing. And
exactly.
Yeah, and I imagine too that if there's not a whole lot of skilled labor, you're looking for someone who you'll need to train up, but also for someone who's willing to take that journey. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's not, shall we say, cost efficient or worth the employer's time, to spend time and resources training these people, and then they leave in a month or two. It's not worth it. I've talked to management just at my shop. I mean, they're looking for, people either with experience or with, that drive that are willing to stay and make the long run of this. Unfortunately, they're not, everywhere. It's not a common thing.
So tell me more about what it is you do specifically.
Well, I'm a CNC machinist, so I do most of the, like your drilling or boring or things of that nature, but to a certain extent, I work on both ends of the shop. If we're needed I'll go down to assemble them, or I'll work in shipping, or I'll go work on the finish grind. I mean, I'll go either end of the shop, do whatever the heck it takes to get it out the door, basically. I guess you could say I'm a kind of, I'll do anything, kind of a jack of trades, you could say.
So what is it that drew you to this work? I mean, what do you enjoy this work?
I do. I like working with my hands. I've always liked physical labor and building things, making things. I've loved that since I was a kid. And actually, I was debating when I was in high school. People would ask me, "What are you going to do? Are you going to college? What are you planning on doing?" I honestly didn't know. I didn't have an idea. I was throwing a few ideas around, and then Ryan Pohl actually contacted me. And at the time, I was like, what? I had no idea what machining was, but I figured I'd give it a try. And I mean, I found out that I love doing it. If someone, was wanting to do this, I would say, heck yeah. I mean, go for it. As long as, you're dedicated and it's something you want to do, you can absolutely make a go of it. Because, yeah, I mean, I didn't have any previous experience whatsoever.
So what is it you think that with these guys that show up and say, it's just a job and maybe I'll stick around, maybe I won't. What leads them to thinking that way? I mean, what are they missing in their approach to their job that leads them to basically think it's okay just to take off after a couple months?
To say it bluntly, and this is from what I've seen, I would say they lack either the drive or the work ethic. a lot of the time, like I would see, you can tell within the first week or so if the person's not going to make it, or if they're not really invested in their career. Like you'll get them. They say stuff like, "Yeah, it's not my job, or not my problem." Not, you can tell within the first week or so that I think it's either they don't care, or it's an attitude or work ethic.
It's interesting, because there's a lot of talk about the skills gap, basically an entire generation sort of being encouraged away, to put it gently, right, from skilled trades.
Oh, yeah.
But, one of the things at Harmel that frankly has sort of been undergirding a lot of our approach here is like, yeah, that's true. There is a definite skills gap. The numbers show that. But this isn't simply a matter of just plucking up a group of people and saying, here, learn these skills. Now you're ready to go.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a character gap that needs to be addressed as well. Would you say that holds in your experience?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Most people, well, I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people think it's better to, like, a lot of my friends actually went to college to get degrees in more of white collar stuff. It's almost looked down upon for manual labor, for working with your hands, for getting dirty. It's almost frowned upon in society. I mean, you can't just get, like you were saying earlier, you can't just get someone off of the street to come in, and you can't just pick someone and be like, go run this machine or go do this job and go. It takes quite a bit of learning, and you have to be willing, to stick in there and see it through.
What's been most surprising to you about moving into the CNC space?
Most surprising, I would say how much they do, and how much the machining industry contributes to society as a whole. Things you use every day are actually, a lot of it is made through plastic injection molding or made in dies and things of that nature. I guess until I entered the trades and I started machining myself, I didn't realize how much they do that, society uses on a daily basis.
Isn't it funny how we can be so blind to things? Like now, as we're recording this talk, I'm sitting at my desk, and I've got, a number of things on my desk here. And I would, just doing a quick inventory, I would say, probably 95% of these required injection molding and and everything that and we've become so accustomed to our lives, and at the same time, we've become so disconnected with how our lives got put together. It's remarkable, and as a result, we have this sense that, somehow this just got here, somehow magically it just showed up, and I don't really need to think about how it got here. And there's a sense in which that's nice. I mean, I don't have to think about every aspect of how food got on my table, as opposed to 7,000 years ago, where I had to think about every aspect. So
exactly,
that's fine, and that's nice. But the cost of that can be, if you're inattentive to what these things are and how they got here, and how it was actually the function of human intellect and initiative, and the people that are not only designing the products but designing the machines that are making the products. We get disconnected from our own reality as a result.
Yeah, you can almost not think about it so much, like where you're saying you forget that it takes people to make these things and to produce them and send them places. It takes all different jobs to make the world go round.
And and the other thing too is we tend, because if we are also apt to see manufacturing, for example, as simply the product of a bunch of human machines, we forget that not only does it take people to make of all these things, but it takes the whole person to make these things, not just their bodies and the functions that they fulfill with their bodies, but their intellects and their creativity and their character. And,
absolutely.
And when you de-emphasize the importance of that, and you devalue the job as a result, it's no question, or it's no wonder why you get a guy that shows up in your shop who's been accustomed to thinking of this sort of labor as, this really doesn't, require anything of my humanity. It doesn't really require anything of my character. And so when they come in there, and, of course they're going to say, it's not my problem. I'm just a cog in a machine, right? I mean, that's a big problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can tell like the guys who are 40, 50, 60 years old who have made a career out of this their entire lives. You can tell just from my experience from being in inspection and an assembly, you can tell that they care and they know what they're doing and they put their whole into their work, because you can tell just from the final product that they do care and they give it their all. They put their name to that piece. They want it right. They want it perfect.
Yeah, that's fascinating. To go back to the stuff around us. If it's a good quality product or whatever it is so not just because there was some ingenious design or some material specialist who knew how to create something that was quality and enduring, but it's because the people that are doing the actual manufacturing have their own type of character and craftsmanship that ensure that it's done correctly and promptly and well and creatively in order for it to actually be the thing it is. And again, this goes back to the whole question of manufacturers are not machines. Manufacturing machines are machines, but the manufacturers are not. All right. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the older fellows in the shop. I mean, the ones who have invested, who've made a career out of this, who are a lot of these guys in whatever skilled trade you're in. Everyone's talking about how this generation is retiring, and there's so few people for them to pass their knowledge on to. Has there been anything you've learned from these guys by interacting them, either about your trade or about work generally?
I've learned a lot of things from them. A lot of things. I mean, there's every day, they got little tips or tricks, or they're always, in my experience, they're always willing to impart their knowledge onto the next generation. Because I had quite a few people at the last shop I was at. He told me, he goes, I'm kind of scared of where this is headed. He goes, no one is either knows about it or wants to get into these trades. He goes, we're going to have a serious shortage here. I mean, they tell me all the time about, you could do it this way or you could do it that. They're always willing to give advice and stuff, because it's sad that the lack of people in the workforce coming in this next generation.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, you get to a certain age, and obviously you have come to care about what you do, your life, your work, your job, your craft. But there's got to be a bit of anxiety in order to say, well, who am I going to hand this to? Who am I going to pass this off to? Because it is remarkable how much of the quality of manufacturing comes down not simply to the things that are written down on the piece of paper or the blueprints or the process designs or anything like this, but just the experience of the men who know the little tricks, the little things that make it work just right, that are handed on person to person, right? And those are the things that you risk losing. So much of the manufacturing had gone overseas, and that's a whole other issue. But when it comes to passing along a skill set from generation to generation within a country or within a culture, that's something that concerns me when I realize, we may have, saved a dollar or two on the end product, but what we've lost is that transference, and not just the transference of knowledge, but everything that transference of knowledge creates in a culture itself, which is a link of strength and culture and ingenuity and creativity that comes when one generation mentors another generation. And you're in a situation now. How old are you?
I am 27.
So yeah, you're the up and coming generation, and you're the one that, if you've got the guys around you, that's not just normal. It's, in a way, it's a blessing, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've found it so true, because Ryan Pohl told me when I was going through the original classes and I first started, he told me, he's like, you can learn the machines and you can learn, he goes, talk to the older generation, the guys who've been there forever. He goes, you'll learn more from them than, you'll ever thought possible. There's kind of a joke around the shop that he goes, some of the older guys, he goes, they'll forget more than you'll ever know.
Yeah, what a shame it would be to just have that go away, because then you have to recreate it all, and you're not going to recreate because their knowledge base wasn't simply a matter of their own experience. It came as a link in a chain from the guys that taught them, and so it's almost like a tradition of the craftsmanship, and it only takes a generation for that to go away.
A big part of it is your willingness to learn. It plays a very large factor in there. You can teach someone till you're blue in the face, but unless they want to learn it and they want to put that into play, into their work, it's no good.
Laborem Exercens is a encyclical by John Paul II, written in 1981, about work and what it means to work. It's a very influential and important encyclical, and today we're going to read 3 sections from Part 2. Part 2 is titled Work and Man, and we will read Parts 4 and 5 and 6 of Part 2. Part 4, in the book of Genesis. The church is convinced that work is a fundamental dimension of man's existence on earth. She's confirmed in this conviction by considering the whole heritage of the many sciences devoted to man: anthropology, paleontology, history, sociology, psychology, and so on. They all seem to bear witness to this reality in an irrefutable way. But the source of the church's conviction is, above all, the revealed Word of God, and therefore, what is a conviction of the intellect is also a conviction of faith. The reason is that the church, and it is worthwhile stating at this point, believes in man. She thinks of man and addresses herself to him not only in the light of historical experience, not only with the aid of the many methods of scientific knowledge, but in the first place, in the light of the revealed word of the living God. Relating herself to man, she seeks to express the eternal designs and transcendent destiny which the living God, the Creator and Redeemer, has linked with him. The church finds in the very first pages of the book of Genesis the source of her conviction that work is a fundamental dimension of human existence on earth. An analysis of these texts makes us aware that they express, sometimes in an archaic way of manifesting thought, the fundamental truths about man in the context of the mystery of creation itself. These truths are decisive for man from the very beginning, and at the same time they trace out the main lines of his earthly existence, both in the state of original justice and also after the breaking caused by sin of the Creator's original covenant with creation in man. When man, who had been created in the image of God, male and female, hears the words, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it," even though these words do not refer directly and explicitly to work, beyond any doubt they indirectly indicate it as an activity for man to carry out in the world. Indeed, they show its very deepest essence. Man is the image of God partly through the mandate received from his Creator to subdue, to dominate the earth. In carrying out this mandate, man, every human being, reflects the very action of the Creator of the universe. Work, understood as a transitive activity, that is to say, an activity beginning in the human subject and directed towards an external object, presupposes a specific dominion by man over the earth, and in its turn, it confirms and develops this dominion. It is clear that the term the earth, of which the biblical text speaks, is to be understood in the first place as that fragment of the visible universe that man inhabits. By extension, however, it can be understood as the whole of the visible world insofar as it comes within the range of man's influence and of his striving to satisfy his needs. The expression subdue the earth has an immense range. It means all the resources that the earth and indirectly the invisible world contains, and which through the conscious activity of man can be discovered and used for his ends. And so these words, placed at the beginning of the Bible, never cease to be relevant. They embrace equally the past ages of civilization and economy, as also the whole of modern reality and future phases of development, which are perhaps already to some extent beginning to take shape, though for the most part they are still almost unknown to man and hidden from him. While people sometimes speak of periods of acceleration in the economic life and civilization of humanity or of individual nations, linking these periods to the progress of science and technology, and especially to the discoveries which are decisive for social and economic life, at the same time it can be said that none of these phenomena of acceleration exceeds the essential content of what was said in that most ancient of biblical texts. As man, through his work, becomes more and more the master of the earth, and as he confirms his dominion over the visible world, again through his work, he nevertheless remains in every case and at every phase of this process within the Creator's original ordering. And this ordering remains necessarily and indissolubly linked with the fact that man was created as male and female in the image of God. This process is, at the same time, universal. It embraces all human beings, every generation, every phase of economic and cultural development, and at the same time, it is a process that takes place within each human being, in each conscious human subject. Each and every individual is at the same time embraced by it. Each and every individual, to the proper extent and in an incalculable number of ways, takes part in the giant process whereby man subdues the earth through his work. Part 5, Work in the Objective Sense, Technology. This universality, and at the same time this multiplicity of the process of subduing the earth, throw light upon human work, because man's dominion over the earth is achieved in and by means of work. There thus emerges the meaning of work in an objective sense, which finds expression in the various epochs of culture and civilization. Man dominates the earth by the very fact of domesticating animals, rearing them, and obtaining from them the food and clothing he needs, and by the very fact of being able to extract various natural resources from the earth and the seas. But man subdues the earth much more when he begins to cultivate it, and then to transform its products, adapting them to his own use. Thus, agriculture constitutes, through human work, a primary field of economic activity and an indispensable factor of production. Industry, in its turn, will always consist in linking the earth's riches, whether nature's living resources, or the products of agriculture, or the mineral or chemical resources, with man's work, whether physical or intellectual. This is also, in a sense, true in the sphere of what are called service industries, and also in the sphere of research, pure or applied. In industry and agriculture, man's work has today, in many cases, ceased to be mainly manual, for the toil of human hands and muscles is aided by more and more highly perfected machinery. Not only in industry, but also in agriculture, we are witnessing the transformations made possible by the gradual development of science and technology. Historically speaking, this, taken as a whole, has caused great changes in civilization from the beginning of the industrial era to the successive phases of development through new technologies such as the electronics and the microprocessor technology in recent years. While it may seem that in the industrial process it is the machine that works and man merely supervises it, making it function and keeping it going in various ways, it is also true that for this very reason, industrial development provides grounds for reproposing in new ways the question of human work. Both the original industrialization that gave rise to what is called the worker question, And the subsequent industrial and post-industrial changes show in an eloquent manner that even in the age of ever more mechanized work, the proper subject of work continues to be man. The development of industry and the various sectors connected with it, even the most modern electronics technology, especially in the fields of miniaturization, communications and telecommunications and so forth, shows how vast is the role of technology, that ally of work that human thought has produced in the interaction between the subject and object of work in the widest sense of the word. Understood in this case not as a capacity or aptitude for work, but rather as a whole set of instruments which man uses in his work, technology is undoubtedly man's ally. It facilitates his work, perfects, accelerates, and augments it. It leads to an increase in the quantity of things produced by work, and in many cases improves their quality. However, it is also a fact that in some instances, technology can cease to be man's ally and become almost his enemy, as when the mechanization of work supplants him, taking away all personal satisfaction and the incentive to creativity and responsibility, when it deprives many workers of their previous employment, or when, through exalting the machine, it reduces man to the status of its slave. If the biblical words, "subdue the earth," addressed to man from the very beginning, are understood in the context of the whole modern age, industrial and post-industrial, then they undoubtedly include also a relationship with technology, with the world of machinery, which is the fruit of the work of the human intellect and a historical confirmation of man's dominion over nature. The recent stage of human history, especially that of certain societies, brings a correct affirmation of technology as a basic coefficient of economic progress. But at the same time, this affirmation has been accompanied by, and continues to be accompanied by, the raising of essential questions concerning human work in relationship to its subject, which is man. These questions are particularly charged with content and tension of an ethical and social character. They therefore constitute a continual challenge for institutions of many kinds, for states and governments, for systems and international organizations. They also constitute a challenge for the church. Section 6. Work in the subjective sense, man as the subject of work. In order to continue our analysis of work, an analysis linked with the word of the Bible telling man that he is to subdue the earth, we must concentrate our attention on work in the subjective sense, much more than we did on the objective significance, barely touching upon the vast range of problems known intimately and in detail to scholars in various fields, and also, according to their specializations, to those who work. If the words of the book of Genesis, to which we refer in this analysis of ours, speak of work in the objective sense in an indirect way, they also speak only indirectly of the subject of work. But what they say is very eloquent and is full of great significance. Man has to subdue the earth and dominate it, because as the image of God, he's a person. That is to say, a subjective being capable of acting in a planned and rational way, capable of deciding about himself, and with a tendency to self-realization. As a person, man is therefore the subject of work. As a person he works, he performs various actions belonging to the work process, independently of their objective content. These actions must all serve to realize his humanity, to fulfill the calling to be a person that is his by reason of his very humanity. The principal truths concerning this theme were recently recalled by the Second Vatican Council in the Constitution Gaudium et Spes, especially in Chapter 1, which is devoted to man's calling. And so this dominion spoken of in the biblical text being meditated upon here refers not only to the objective dimension of work, but at the same time introduces us to an understanding of its subjective dimension. Understood as a process whereby man and the human race subdue the earth, Work corresponds to this basic biblical concept only when, throughout the process, man manifests himself and confirms himself as the one who dominates. This dominion, in a certain sense, refers to the subjective dimension even more than to the objective one. This dimension conditions the very ethical nature of work. In fact, there is no doubt that human work has an ethical value of its own, which clearly and directly remain linked to the fact that the one who carries it out is a person, a conscious and free subject. That is to say, a subject that decides about himself. This truth, which in a sense constitutes the fundamental and perennial heart of Christian teaching on human work, has had and continues to have primary significance for the formulation of the important social problems characterizing whole ages. The ancient world introduced its own typical differentiation of people into classes according to the type of work done. Work which demanded from the worker the exercise of physical strength, the work of muscles and hands, was considered unworthy of free men and was therefore given to slaves. By broadening certain aspects that already belonged to the Old Testament, Christianity brought about a fundamental change of ideas in this field, taking the whole content of the gospel message as its point of departure, especially the fact that the one who, while being God, became like us in all things, devoted most of the years of his life on earth to manual work at the carpenter's bench. This circumstance constitutes in itself the most eloquent gospel of work, showing that the basis for determining the value of human work is not primarily the kind of work being done, but the fact that the one who is doing it is a person. The sources of the dignity of work are to be sought primarily in the subjective dimension, not in the objective one. Such a concept practically does away with the very basis of the ancient differentiation of people into classes according to the kind of work done. This does not mean that, from the objective point of view, human work cannot and must not be rated and qualified in any way. It only means that the primary basis of the value of work is man himself, who is his subject. This leads immediately to a very important conclusion of an ethical nature. However true it may be that man is destined for work and called to it, in the first place, work is for man, and not man for work. Through this conclusion, one rightly comes to recognize the preeminence of the subjective meaning of work over the objective one. Given this way of understanding things, and supposing that different sorts of work that people do can have greater or lesser objective value, let us try, nevertheless, to show that each sort is judged above all by the measure of the dignity of the subject of work, that is to say, the person, the individual who carries it out. On the other hand, independently of the work that every man does, and presupposing that this work constitutes a purpose, at times a very demanding one, of his activity, this purpose does not possess a definitive meaning in itself. In fact, in the final analysis, it is always man who is the purpose of work. Whatever work it is that is done by man, even if the common scale of values rates it as the merest service, as the most monotonous, even the most alienating work. Hey, thanks everyone for listening. Just a reminder, we are now accepting applications for fall of 2021. If you know a young fellow who might be interested in learning a high-demand skilled trade while being formed in his Catholic faith, please send him our way, send him to our website, encourage him to check us out. We are taking in applications now, so he's going to want to jump on the application process. We have a limited number of seats for the fall, and we'd love to fill them up as quickly as possible. And also, if you would like to support our work, or if you know someone who would like to support our work, please reach out to us at harmelacademy.org. Your gift is tax deductible, and if you consider a gift to us to help us continue to build this academy, sure would help us out a lot. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you soon.